So let's talk about the problem of energy storage, ladies and gentlemen. I remember as a child traveling from Bradford to Lahore to visit my family and seeing all this load shedding and thinking, God, you know, in the middle of summer, thinking, you know, what's wrong with this country? They can't even get the electricity sorted out. Clearly, I was ignorant as a child, but it did strike me that clearly this was a problem. And obviously, for the people who live there, I was only going there for a month at a time, but for the people who live there, clearly this was a you know, life and death situation. My number is 205 million Pakistanis. Khalid is a bit more. About 50 million of those don't have access to any electricity or are off the grid essentially. 140 basically have load shedding, which is a significant number. Remember that the number of Pakistanis is going to rise to about, as Khalid may have alluded, by 2050 it's going to be about 310 million because of the way that population growth is going. So that number of Pakistanis is going to increase. There have been some great initiatives recently. The CPAC initiative I'll mention. Installed capacity, 29,000 megawatts. That's not the same as what the actual output is. There's a lot of inefficiencies in the installed capacity. So the outputs are somewhere around 16,000 megawatts. These numbers, by the way, can change depending on which articles you read. So some of you may have read articles that are completely different numbers, but these are the best I could get averaging across. This means there's a shortfall, particularly in summer, so this is why there's up to 12 hours or more of load shedding a day, and that's really the issue. Why are there problems? Well, there's energy theft, there's circular debt, people not paying, high energy prices, reliance on oil that's imported, that's expensive compared to other things, low use of local resources such as coal at the present, but that's going to change dramatically. Outdated transmission lines and poor maintenance of various types of plants. So these have been problems of the past, and this is about to change. Of course, people have different views of the China link and the CPEC. Some people think it's a good thing, some people think it's a complete disaster. I'm kind of not sure, personally. You know, this is a large amount of loans from China, okay? I'm not making a political statement here, this is a fact. And this originally was about 46 billion, it's gone up to about 62 billion worth of loans. This is about 34 billion of the original 46 was for energy-related things, where it's clearly a priority in terms of the economic benefits. But there are other benefits, but obviously I don't have time. Here's a little diagram of some of the things that are going to be happening in CPAC. And of course, Pakistan in particular has always benefited from hydropower, large hydropower. But the thing that concerns me as somebody who's interested in the environment is the fact that there's going to be a large amount of coal-fired power stations being built and relatively small number of renewable energy type scenarios happening in terms of solar and wind. And this is what concerns me. But of course, Pakistan does need a reliable source of electricity, and it needs it now. It doesn't need it in 10 years' time. And of course, they're sitting on 186 billion tons of tar coal, which is another areas where there's large coal deposits, particularly down here, where you can see the coal power stations are happening near Karachi. The coal that's there is not of the best quality, okay? It needs to have the sulfur removed, so you know there are options to mix it with higher quality coal to upgrade it or desulfurize it. And I visited some of the universities that are looking at this actively right now. But this could last up to 300 years. If you use it at current levels of use, of energy use in Pakistan, it would last 300 years. So it's kind of a secure source, but clearly it's highly polluting and it's going to affect the health of people who are exposed to that, okay? And many other countries around the world have moved away from fossil fuels, particularly China, that's massively expanded its solar and wind. You know, so they haven't really done that in CPAC, and you know there are good reasons for that, okay? Because people are impatient; they want the energy now. They don't want to wait 10 years for us to start installing things. If we look at the fuel mix in Pakistan, the current rough fuel mix is really so the grey areas here, the dark areas are fossil fuels. The green areas are what we call renewable or clean technology. So the vast majority, roughly 30%, is the large hydro power stations. So Pakistan is blessed with having hydropower. Some would say cursed because, of course, some argue that it affects the water flow coming in. So the agriculturalists will say, yes, there's a problem. You reduce the power of the water. Its energy has been lost, so it can't grow plants. So there's all kinds of misnomers about the water. But the point is, this is renewable energy on a grand scale, and it's a large percentage of the country. So they are really blessed with having that. In the future, what's going to essentially happen is the big difference between now and 2025, if I could just point one statistic, is there's very little coal at the moment. I mean, it's quite a small level. I haven't put it on here, but it's very small. It's going to be significantly larger. So it's approximately 20% of it is coal, is going to replace. Oil will stay the same. And so particularly as a percentage, renewables will slightly increase, and so will nuclear. And of course, there are nuclear power plants being planned as part of the CPEC. So look, I mean, I could go into a lot more detail, but we really don't have time. But I just want to give you the overall impression. There's a big increase in coal, and that's not renewable energy. So what are the potential is there? Well, the USAID has done some very nice work looking at the potential for wind. So 50 meters above the ground, the areas that are highly colored are the areas where there's a very big potential for wind. And of course, there are wind installations in many of these regions where there's particularly good for wind. USAID has also looked at solar power, and in the really dark red regions, what you can see in Balochistan and some of the sort of northwest frontier province, as it used to be known, areas, what you can see is that you've got sun levels equivalent of Arizona or Las Vegas, a sort of really, really hot, sunny climate where you could quite easily have excellent potential for solar. Of course, solar is something that the price of solar has dropped dramatically over the last few years. It's sort of really come down to almost be able to compete, or being able to compete with grid power. So it is a very attractive thing, but you need to maintain it. So there are certain disadvantages about solar. The other advantage of solar is, of course, you can deploy it very quickly, within days or weeks. It doesn't take 10 years or 5 years to build a plant. Okay, so these are some of the advantages. What about remote villages? I'm interested in the 50 million off-grid. What is happening to them? How are they going to operate? So I've tried to sort of think about a solution. I'll tell you about a £20 million hub grant that we put in that we are hoping is going to get funded. It's a £20 million grant on renewable energy and involves Pakistan. Okay? So this is what it's about. We know that Pakistan has a thriving micro-hydro turbine. In the mountainous regions of Pakistan, they've got a really great system of turbines. They've got a great history of this going back a long time. But even small-scale micro-hydro turbines, 5 to 100 kilowatts, you can power several homes with this or small villages. There's great potential, and Pakistan has been doing that through the rural support programs. The Sarhad and the Aga Khan programs have delivered, to numerous households, but there's massive potential there still for micro-hydro or solar as well. The big issue that I see is that what we really want to do is to work towards a smart village type scenario. So this is what it means. So if you're living in the urban environment, you are connected to the grid, and of course you're getting load shedding because the supply and demand at peak times, the demand cannot keep up with the supply. The supply cannot keep up with the demand. Okay? So if you're connected to the grid, then you're going to get load shedding. However, let's imagine you're living off-grid, and if you're off-grid, you're using solar or wind, or maybe you're using a hydro turbine or a micro-hydro turbine of some kind that you've just connected up to your house or your village, and you're using that. Of course, the solar power you can only use during the daytime, and then the hydro turbine, sometimes it's a little bit seasonal as well. Okay? Now, the issue is that you've got to use that electricity when it's available. You can't somehow store it. Okay? So there are ways of storing, such as a UPS, but it doesn't store much energy. The technology exists now to develop various technologies that are coming down in price as we go, and I'll talk why they're coming down in price. But really what we have in the West and other places is energy storage and management. So it's basically a battery with some power electronics, and what it can do is allow you to store energy so that you can use it during peak times. Okay? You can even sell it to the grid if you're connected, and this is already happening in Pakistan in the urban areas, but it's not happening in villages, and a lot of it's to do with the cost of these devices. But what this device allows you to do is store that energy and use it when you really need it. And of course, if you connect these modules together, you can have smart villages that are connected and that sort supply and demand. Okay? And this is a concept that exists in the West. It's beginning to go into the developing world, and there are initiatives in 2014, Cambridge University and others had an initiative. So we applied for, and this is partly the reason why we need Upsign. Okay? We need Upsign because when the global challenges GCRF funding comes around, so funding comes around, it says, we want hubs worth £20 million with UK universities and with several other countries. Okay? So what we can do as Upsign, if we get together and form this network, we can make sure when these challenges come out, such as this one for hubs, we can make sure that Pakistan is part of that team. So this particular one that we put in with some other partners of 20 million, 9 million goes to the overseas partners, and the great thing is this is also going to help sort of India-Pakistan cooperation as well, right, which is a really important thing. And I know Sharia Khan is a big advocate of that through cricket, so I think it's worth mentioning that as well. Now, 2 million of that will go to 6 universities in Pakistan to develop energy storage capability and knowledge and technology and training. If we get the funding, we'll also be able to link up with what's known as the Faraday Institute. So the Faraday Institute, I'm a member of the Faraday Institute. Faraday Initiative is 250 million of UK money on the electrification of transport for electric vehicles, and this is funded for the next 3 years. Okay, so there's a huge amount of money and training in the UK on battery technologies. Okay, that training can be accessed by Pakistani researchers on initiatives like this. Okay, so we can, it's really easy to coordinate this if you're involved in the UK side. And what we have, and what's really important, is we're looking at how energy, affordable clean energy, affects poverty, health, gender equality, education. Clearly, we need to link the technical people with the social scientists, and that's what we can do if we get together and do it properly. Okay? So, in summary, Pakistan is blessed with hydropower. The coal is going to be a big part of the future, at least 20%. Renewables need to grow, and we need to find effective financing and cost models to do that. It's not going to be, it's not going to be for everybody, and of course, people will always talk about affordability, and I understand that completely, and there are ways to get there. We need energy storage, has to be included. It's not just about renewable. You have to store the energy to time shift it so you can use it when you need it, okay? And that the technology exists, and the cost will come down. The cost will come down is because around the world, people are going to build electric vehicles. All the vehicles are going to be electric in the Western world. That means you've got a car battery is 50 kilowatt hours. You could run 10 houses. Once a battery comes to the end of its life, it's usually at 80% of its original capacity. That means you could run 8 to 10 houses in a village off of one X car battery from an electric vehicle. So these can be integrated into this smart grid idea that I'm talking about. This is already being done. Okay? So you're just second life batteries. That's all it is. We need the university to take the lead, and we need to jump on this battery revolution. So thank you very much. If you're interested in clean energy, you can join my WhatsApp group, and we can discuss options for Pakistan. Thank you again.
Thank you very much.